Hello, retro fans. This is basically the, kind of announced second part of the Analogue NT Mini version 2 Noir edition. That's the full name. I just learned that version 2 is basically the Noir edition anyway, so some sort of redundant anyway. So, but I went through a couple of features and I did some, let's say, online reading, not going to call it research anyway. And yeah, I have a couple of things in mind and I tested a couple of things, and this session is about going through those, features. I don't know how we're going to call this. Anyway, I'm going to play a little bit with the NT Mini, and that's basically the review about this. So stay tuned, we are back in a couple of seconds. Yesterday, it was indeed yesterday, so it's really, I'm kind of surprised that I do the continuation of the video right the day after, but I went through a couple of things on the NT Mini, and yeah, as you can see, it's on my desk, and one thing I really want to show you today as well, but for this I may have to make some space, is basically a size comparison. So I'm back in a second. So just ignore the fact that this case is a little bit beaten up, but I move this a little bit to the side. Now we have space for the original NES, and as you can see, compared to the NT Mini, maybe that's the reason for the name, the original NES is indeed huge. So, and even the height is just half of the original NES case. And the even more interesting thing is that if you have a look how an NES looks on the inside, then you may recognize that it is basically almost empty. So yeah, I just want to show you this. So in case you are running out of space in your retro collection, but you want to have a couple of consoles available, then perhaps this is indeed an interesting option, because, well, it consumes way less space than the original device. But one, point you may have to keep in mind, the original NES, the front loader NES, can be stacked. You can put other devices on top of it, which isn't possible with this one because that's a top loader. So you really have to go for this or for that anyway. But yeah, and interestingly, compared to the device, the original cartridges are looking very huge, but fortunately we got the functionality of running Famicom cartridges, and they fit size-wise even better to this device. But well, that's just something I forgot to mention yesterday. And one thing I was going to set up was the analog output using RGB. I haven't tested yet composite and S-video. I guess I'm going to need a separate cable or something like this, which I may have to build. But having HDMI and RGB there's basically no real need to go for S-video or composite video signals anyway. So that's probably not going to be my main concern. But I spent some time getting those two things combined, talking about OSSC and the NT Mini. And it's not really love on first sight, so that's really something I have to mention. You really need to spend some time trying to get those two thingies combined. And one of the main things is basically that, to me at least, it appears that the now we got even some sound. Let's disable this for a minute. I just have to keep in mind to enable it later on. Is that the HDMI world of the NT Mini and the analog world are kind of two separate things. And we can see this quite clearly if we jump into the menu and go to settings, go to video, go to resolution. These resolutions shown here are purely HDMI resolutions. And my picture moved back a bit, so I'm sorry. Do it like this and go full screen. So, and it doesn't matter what I select here. This is just the HDMI resolution, and this makes it a little bit, let's say, complicated to work with, because the thing is, it's a bit crazy that my picture keeps jumping left and right. So hopefully, when I went through all of those scenes, then we will be right at the end of the video, perhaps. And well, what I was going to say is that the NT Mini outputs kind of a native resolution compared to the original NES, which is not too bad, talking about analog side. So HDMI is a different world. But on the other side, if you feed this into scalars, then you may have to do some configuration work. And at the beginning, I was really struggling with kind of a jittering picture. You may have seen this in the previous episode. And even part of the top screen was missing. This could be solved by... hope I find it. Extra features, enable the jitter. And this has solved the problem partly, because strange thing is, if we jump to different scale mode, let's go for this one, then we can see that we have some kind of full screen vertical jitter. But if we crank up the scalar mode, then it tends to disappear. So times 5. Now it's basically gone. So strange thing. I'm not sure whether this is just purely related to the OSSC or if this is some kind of strange combo. But my experience is that the OSSC has some issues with RGB anyway, because I have, for example, the Turbo Chameleon from individual computers, which has an RGB output, and those two devices, they kind of hate each other. It's really not really working well, but yeah, anyway, so, and what we can see here right now are basically some picture with scan lines, but these scan lines are not coming from the NT Mini right now. So if I jump to no scan lines, normal scan lines, hybrid scan lines, nothing is going to change in the background, because the scan lines are added to the HDMI output only. So if you want to have the NT Mini over analog output with scan lines, then you need a scaler that is adding scan lines to it. So I haven't found a way to enable scan lines natively coming out of the NT Mini, which would be, in my opinion, the best way, because then you do not have the problem of, let's say, facing some sort of an offset in your scan lines or having the wrong amount of scan lines, for example, which is often the case for devices like the C64 with the border around this. And if you do not really use the native resolution to add the scan lines to it and then scale the picture, then you end up with a very strange picture. And if you look very closely at the background picture, you may see that the scan lines here aren't perfect either. So there's a small offset in it, and this is perhaps just because, well, the OSSC starts at a different position adding the scan lines, but for normal, let's say, gameplay, I think it looks quite fine. And for me it is okayish, but it's a little bit pity that we do not have this option natively on the NT Mini. So much about video options and stuff. Then one key learning I went through is that if you configure all your options and if you are really happy with it and you think that you just switch off your console, switch it on later, come back and find it in the very same state you have left it, then I have to say no, it is not working this way, because we have to go to settings and have to say save settings. So here you can say save settings or restore factory defaults. And if you're not going to do so, it starts with the last saved set of settings, which can be okay, because if you screw up something and if you're not going to see anything anymore, then this is perhaps a good idea. But as I said, I was a bit confused this evening when I switched the NT Mini on again to find it in a different state compared to, well, the previous episode. So that much about those features. And yesterday I had a very short attempt of testing the SD card functionality. And I just learned that this SD card slot provides, well, support for SD cards, blah. But it is not really doing something with it. So, and in order to change this, you have to, let's say, install a different firmware. And if you go to the internet and search for NT Mini firmware, then you end up on either Discord channel or on Atari Age forum, and there is a so-called jailbreak firmware. And this sounds a little bit, well, not so comfortable, let's say, but it is written there that the programmer who did the original firmware for the NT Mini is basically the creator of the jailbreak firmware as well. And this firmware is going to add a lot of new features and functionality to the NT Mini. And you may guess it already, I'm going to test to install this firmware. And in order to do so, we have to switch off the console. And just to be as easy as possible, we remove the cartridge, and hopefully it is going to read my SD card. So I got a LED, I got a boot screen, this hasn't worked the way I have expected this. So now it looks like it's working. I got a flashing LED on the front of the NT Mini, and I had to reformat the SD card, and well, I had to use the right type of firmware. I was trying to flash the version 1 jailbreak firmware onto version 2, and fortunately either the wrong formatted SD card has kind of prevented this, or the NT Mini was smart enough not to use this wrong firmware. So anyway, now I found the most recent version, and I have created the file structure, directory structure on the SD card as well, copied a couple of files over there, and now fingers crossed we just have to wait until the firmware update has been completed. So what I found on the internet is that this takes about 3 minutes, and we are already about 2 minutes into the progress, so hopefully we are going to see something pretty soon. So in the meantime, there is a GitHub page with the firmware and very detailed instructions how to install this. And the interesting thing is that the new firmware will support cores, as we may know this already from the Turbo Chameleon. So FPGA-based systems can use different cores to kind of, I'm still not sure whether we call it simulate, emulate, recreate different systems. And this has been added to this so-called jailbreak firmware as well. But some of those cores require a BIOS, a ROM file, like we know this from the C64, for example. And these are basically and obviously not included. So you really have to go through some search engines and try to find them for yourself. And in the GitHub page instruction, there is mentioned how to name them, and then hopefully they will be found by the system. So the front LED has changed the color from flashing red to constant red to sort of blue, but still have no video output on the analog side. So let's wait a couple of seconds, see if it is still in some sort of flashing mode, boot mode, whatever, or if it is now a very stylish brick on my desk. Well, it is stated you can't break the device, so we will see if this is going to be true, or maybe I'm the first person who were able to prove this statement wrong. But yeah, we may have a look at the HDMI port. Yes, there it is. We have at least a video signal. That's basically a good sign, and we can see cores, and therefore the firmware update has indeed something changed on the system. Now we have this sort of jumping picture again, but basically we know how to solve this. It's probably going to be a little bit annoying doing this with a black screen, so let's switch back. Extra features, digital. Let's see how our analog output looks like. Much better now. And basically this is what we are talking about. Then let's see whether we can save this. Yep. So I'm back. I spent some time testing some of the cores and testing some of the features of the new firmware or of the jailbreak firmware, whatever we want to call this. And one major thing which I really love is basically the feature of having more than 8 sprites per scan line. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you in a second. And basically, let's just jump into the settings. And as we can see, 16 sprites per scan line is actually off. So now let's have a look how this looks like. So if I'm going to create a lot of bubbles, then we can see that they start to kind of get a little bit distorted. And in other games it is basically visible by flickering sprites, especially in Gradius, for example. But if we are going to enable the feature of 16 sprites per scan line, and going out of this, now we can create as much bubbles as we want to create, and everything looks fine, no flickering, no half sprites, something like this. So this is working really nice, and this is indeed a fantastic feature. And especially for the game Gradius, I mean, we can quickly jump into it if I'm able to find this. Gradius Europe, okay. We may just have waited for the intro. Oh. Just have to remember which button. Well, as we can see, everything is nice and smooth. Jump into the option and set it back to standard. Extra feature. And here we can see sprites start to flicker if there is too much action on the screen. And especially in Gradius 2, which isn't available as a European release, but as a Famicom version, actually the cartridge that's currently installed here in this nice little device. The dragon between the suns, for example, this is really a major difference, and especially in later levels, if it gets really busy, then it is much easier to play with this option enabled. And therefore, let's set it back to this, and then everything will be fine. So you may say, that's not original. Well, that's okay, but as much as we want to have it originally, there are some things that are simply better if they are improved a little bit. So anyway, we are talking about an HDMI capable console running multiple cartridge formats, as well as running in different region settings. So anyway, but I was talking about cores so let's test some cores. And as you may have seen, I have started the game out of this directory. So these are basically files on my SD card, and as you may have recognized already, I'm not running them from the cartridge, and therefore this is basically the NES core, but I haven't expected that this is going to be very different to the original NES core, because, well, at the end it doesn't matter whether the file comes from an SD card or if the content of a cartridge is, well, read over the cartridge port. This FPGA based machine has to some sort of emulate the system anyway, so this is basically not so tricky. I haven't filled all the directories with files, so I'm not able to test all the cores, but I found a couple of games for the Atari 7800, and well, what would be a nice Atari game? Perhaps Donkey Kong. Let's have a look at this. Bad header. Okay, not all games are working. So let's find some that's working. We are on the wrong. Well, we have to switch the core. So, yep. And I forgot how to do so. Nope. Go back. Yep. So now we are on the boot menu of the NT Mini, and here we have the option to run the cartridge, which is not what we want to do now, but here we have the cores, and now we can go to the Atari. So it takes a moment to load the core to switch to the new system. So let's start a game again. Let's go for Donkey Kong. Takes a second or two. Hopefully it's doing something. Nope, probably not. Well, then let's test another one. Oh, okay. Then let's go for Commando. So one issue with most of the cores is probably that the original devices had some different key mappings, or the controller had different keys at all. So that's probably going to be a little bit tricky to start the game. But let's see if we can have some core options. Difficulty A, B, whatever. Current BIOS. But still unable to start the game. Maybe a second controller could do the trick. But this may need some, well, testing. Nope, it's not helpful. Well, then let's see if we can find another game that maybe works. So the green bar at the bottom, which you can't see, interesting, is perhaps showing us that this isn't working. That would be strange if Commando is the only game that at least starts, but we can't play it. So let me check something else. System. Hardware. We may switch to PAL region. This may help. So let's try it again. Nope. Oh, no. I think this is not the main intention. So perhaps this needs some fine-tuning. Or maybe it's the wrong BIOS file, I have no idea. But it looks like I really have to spend some more time perhaps getting this to work. So then well, let's go out of this. Yes, and go for another call. So what else? I have no games for the Atari 2600. Nothing for the Genesis, but we have we may have a short look at the Nsf Player, which is basically the Nintendo sound file or sound format player. And here we are able to listen to thousands of sound files. So we have play and stop, and we can select different subtunes, but basically it looks like that's all of the features we have available. So that's not something like a jukebox or so. But well, if you have the need to listen to whatever sound file you want, then we have some sort of a music player available. I was listening to one of those, I think. And one file or one song title, whatever we want to call this, was utilizing more than just the APU as a sound device. And that's something specific about the NES, because the cartridge may contain different sound system as well, and then you can add, for example, digital voices, like you have may recognized in Gradius 2, for example, or I think in Sky Destroyer as well. There are a couple of games, and so it looks like this player is able to do so as well. But, well, let's go back. Let's go out of this. And test another core. Hopefully the next one is going to work a little bit better. So I think I got some stuff for the ColecoVision. Backwards. Whatever. At least it starts. Now we just have to figure out how to go into the game. Get ready. This sounds good. So, yeah. This looks very nice. In terms of, well, the specs of the system. But, well, at least it is playable. And what I've learned is that there are a couple of new releases for the ColecoVision as well. So I may have a look whether I can find some new stuff as digital download version or so. And then it would be cool to test this. Let's have a look at another one. Go back. Oops, wrong button. Choplifter. Donkey Kong. Maybe this Donkey Kong is working. Galaxian. There are so many versions. Ah, very nice. Player one. As far as I remember, I have to go for the flying objects, because then I get more points. I've played this on the Game Boy quite extensively a couple of years ago, or many years ago. And I wrote my high score on a little post-it on the back of the cartridge, because those old Game Boy original cartridges weren't able to save the high score. So let's finish at least this level. Yeah. Okay, so ColecoVision games, very nice. Then let's go for the next one. Course. I think I had nothing for the Game Gear, but Game Boy. Indeed, as a Nintendo boy. So, and as usual for the Game Boy, there are a million of games. Well, that's a little bit that's exaggerating, but there are so many games that I just picked a couple of them, and then let's go for Galaxian. Europe. So, nice greenish color. This color is very loud. Interesting. So look whether there are some core options. Nope. Nothing about audio, but that's really surprising that there are so huge differences in cores. So factful. There we go. So, very nice. Game Boy is working. So, and indeed, one game I've played on the Game Boy a lot as well is Ottos or die Fanden. Probably nothing you may know outside of Germany, but I'm not specifically an Otto fan, but I really love the game. And the issue is that you have to write down level codes. But it's an isometric game. And the task is to walk around and finish levels, basically. It's really loved. Interesting. And especially on the original Game Boy, it was a little bit hard to play because on the tiny screen with the, let's say, reduced contrast, it was sometimes a little bit tricky to figure out what's going to kill you and what's not. So I really appreciated moving to the Game Boy Color, and there you had a chance to colorize well, basically black and white or black and green graphic a bit, so that you were able to detect moving objects a little bit easier than on the original Game Boy. So actually that's working, that's very nice. So now I can play this in big screen mode, not on this tiny little display. So then let's jump out of this, and we can test a couple of others, but I think this looks very nice so far. Then Game Boy Color. So, and here there's one game I've played a lot, and this is indeed Duke Nukem. And this is basically a game with a save game feature. So let's see if we are able to move as far as makes sense to save something. Let's skip the intro. New game, load game options. Sound. Cool. So, load game. Okay, it's basically empty. So let's start a new game. Let's do it easy, just for the purpose of the presentation. This looks really funny in big screen mode. And I can't even see it as big as you can see it right now. Oh! Ah, you can stand something like this. So actually I'm not sure you can save in between, or if we have to move to a certain point. So let me play this for a while, and I think I cut out a part of it. So basically, hours later I made it to the end of the first level. I got lost in between and went down the same floor over and over again, and finally. So now we are able to save. Let's see if this is going to work. Save. Save game 1. And it looks like this is level 2. So now let's jump out of this and go back. Do this again. Start game. Okay. Yeah, it has saved something. Very nice. So we got save game features on this Gameboy Color core as well. But this is really nice. And I think it's basically enough for this core, and Tetris DX, for example, has save game features as well. At least your stats and your high score and all that stuff saved there. And yep, very nice. So let's go back. So I think we have saved everything. So go out of this. And I think basically that was the last core where I have added some ROMs. So it will take a while to go through all this stuff and find the files required respectively. And one cool thing, as you may have seen in the background as well, I'm kind of interested in the so-called Apfelmännchen in the Mandelbrot set. And now we are able to do this on the NES as well. So we can zoom and we can move. And well, it is not super fast, but let's see whether we have some options. Oh, the Julia set, that's cool. options. Iterations. Let's reduce this a little bit. Maybe it's going to be a bit faster then. Maybe we have to move to an area with not that much of this big black thingy. So I think what we have to keep in mind that we have left the technical capabilities of the NES already. So this is basically the power of the FPGA. And yeah, now we can move a little bit faster here. And well, it is surprisingly fast. So it's probably not going to be the main usage of this device to calculate the Mandelbrot set, but well, it's a funny feature, I have to admit. And actually we can zoom quite nicely. So let's move out of this. And but how? Good question. Yes. Yeah, and this is basically sort of the end of this video already, since I haven't prepared more files for the different cores, but as we have seen, it is working quite fine. So since I'm in PAL mode, Gradius as an NTC game isn't working very nicely. So let's jump into the cores and go to NES and then. So yeah, sort of kinda final conclusion, something like this about this little device here on my desk. On the one side, I'm really impressed. So this thing is capable of a lot of things I haven't even had in mind when I bought it. I was just looking for a sort of all-purpose NES/Famicom device because I was a little bit, let's say, annoyed by having an PAL NES and an NTSC NES and an NTSC Famicom, and I wasn't able to run this game on this device, and here I had RGB output, and on the other devices I just had composite output, and therefore this was basically the main purpose. And so to say, I got even more than I was looking for, and those features are really, really impressive. I mean, I have used the EverDrive 8, I think was the name, on the NES, but I wasn't really happy with it because a lot of stuff wasn't really working, and so I sold it. And most of the time I just go for the cartridges anyway, because if I like a game, then I really try to buy this. But I kind of quickly run into the problem that certain games, like for example Gradius 2, aren't available as European releases. So I was kind of jumping between the two consoles, and I was a little bit annoyed by the bad video quality on the one console and having RGB on the other. But let's say the effort to convert RGB over FrameMeister or over OSSC to HDMI makes this whole setup a little bit bulky, so to say. And therefore it is really nice to have now a console with all the options included already. Got HDMI, got analog output, and we got audio, and we got SD card support, and you can put as many games as you want on this SD card, and then you can run those games from the SD card, or you set the console to start the cartridge if there is one inserted, and then you can use this as a standard, well, NES/Famicom console. The size is really impressive. It's very, very nice to have such a small console, because as you may know from my videos, my desk is always a little bit busy, and having too much stuff on it like original NES, FrameMeister, OSC, all the cables, all that stuff, makes it sometimes a little bit hard to work on projects, because I really have to get rid of it at all to have space on my desk. And now I can put this in place of the NES, and then I can play whatever game I'm in the mood for, whether it's NES, Famicom, Game Boy, Game Gear, Atari systems, as soon as I get this to work. And that's indeed very nice. And well, the price tag, it's indeed a bit high, but I think the non-special edition, the non-noir edition, has basically the same technical features. I'm not sure, maybe that's something I really have to check. So, but if we put everything together, let's say standard NES with an RGB mod, with some sort of a scaler to put this into or to convert this into HDMI, then the other EverDrive, for example, as an SD card solution, then you easily exceed the amount of money you spend on this box, and then you're still not able to play Game Boy games or everything else we have tested here today. And you might be able to play on the NTSC NES some Famicom games, but I think not with all the features, so there might be some sound limitations, something like this. I'm actually not sure. By using the adapter or something like this. And well, and on top we have a wireless controller. Whether we need this or not, that's one thing, but that's indeed a little bit handy if you just want to doodle around a little bit and having some nice and easy game session. And yeah, overall, I'm really impressed. I'm really happy about this thingy. And yeah, I will spend some time getting some stuff for the other course, and I'm looking forward to perhaps some further development of this little thing. And that's basically the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching, as usual. I'm looking forward to your comments and questions, whatever you have in the comment section. And then, well, thanks very much. Thank you very much. Many thanks. Now we got it right. And see you for the next episode. Bye bye.